Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Compound and Friends. I'm here with George Kurtz for a live from the Compound discussion. George is the CEO and co-founder of, in my opinion, the hottest stock on Wall Street this year that isn't called NVIDIA. I just want to give you guys a little bit of a background here. CrowdStrike is a leading provider of next-generation endpoint protection, threat intelligence, and services. George has more than 30 years of experience in the security space. His prior roles at McAfee, a multi-billion-dollar security company, include worldwide chief technology officer, general manager, and executive vice president of enterprise. George Kurtz, this is, I think, your third appearance on the Compound. Do you think I have that right?
I think that's right. And
All right.
It's always a fun time. So I enjoy doing it with you, and there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, man, we're so excited to have the opportunity to check in with you. It's a really momentous time for CrowdStrike. I wanted to, and last time I did this to you, and you don't follow these stats as closely as I do. CrowdStrike is categorized as infrastructure software. That's like your stock market industry group. Yeah. You are the sixth largest now infrastructure software firm in the world, with a market cap of about $94 billion today. So you are really only behind a small handful of names: Microsoft, Oracle, Adobe, Palo Alto, and it's a small group that you're now a part of. CrowdStrike is the seventh best performer year to date in the Nasdaq 100, and the 14th best performer in the S&P 500, up 51%. And you are the best performing software stock year to date within both indices. So I don't have my applause button, but this has been one hell of a run for you guys, and I know it's a really big team effort. So I wanted to start off by just saying congratulations on how 2024 is going so far.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's been a heck of a run, and obviously lots of good things to talk about. But that's why I enjoy coming on. I get all the fresh stats from you.
So now you know everything that's happening. Well, so here's where I want to start. So CrowdStrike is, at this point, fairly well known, maybe very well known by the investor community, given the performance and the execution. And it's a pretty big brand that everyone knows. You guys are like the first name in cybersecurity. But I wanted to ask you what you think CrowdStrike is doing right to have separated yourself to the degree that you have. Just to put that in perspective, you have, over the last year, CrowdStrike stock is up 170%. Zscaler is up 41. What's net? Cloudflare up 35. Palo Alto up 32. And Fortinet not having a great year. But that's a pretty big disparity. And at first glance, I look at gross margins. You guys are all mid-70s, which is pretty incredible. Earnings growth, certainly you've distinguished yourself. CrowdStrike is 63%. And expected earnings growth for next year, CrowdStrike at 22%. So certainly the fundamentals are amazing. But what else do you think you guys are doing that maybe some of the other players aren't doing as much of or as well, without getting into, specific companies? But where are you guys really distinguishing yourself in the eyes of investors?
Sure. So one comment on the chart, when you look at the gross margin piece, that's a blended gross margin. If you look at our subscription gross margin, it's above 80. So,
sure, understood.
And I think that's a big part of what we've been able to do is, you and I have talked about this for some time, is the fact that we built the platform in such a way that it allows the scalability and allows the margin and the accretion to fall to the bottom line as we sell more modules. Part of the thesis when I started the company was data was a critical element to solve security problems. So if you can collect the right data at the right time in the right amounts, you can make decisions in real time, and then you can also use that data to go back and retrain all the algorithms. And we were doing AI before it was fashionable. It was called machine learning then, but it was AI. And now, obviously, the newer AI technologies, which we leverage as well, is generative AI, which we can talk about. But it started with building the cloud platform from the ground up. We're not a firewall company. We don't have boxes. We don't have a lot of legacy models like business models, right? So the software delivery model of a SaaS lines up with the revenue model, and a lot of times those are not different. A lot of times those are different for companies. They might have term licenses, but they have things that are on premise, and it just makes things harder. So we have a very clean model. This is for your investors, which is really important. It's software delivered as a service, and there's no hardware associated with it. So we don't have all those legacy kind of hardware issues. Once we collect the data one time, this is the beauty of the model, and this is why the margin keeps going up and up, is the fact that once we collect the data, then we're able to monetize that with additional modules on the platform. And when I started, we had one module, but the general idea was, how do we expand that out into being a platform like a Salesforce or a Workday or ServiceNow? And that's what we've been able to do.
So George, let me jump in. Let me jump in with a follow up for people that aren't terribly familiar with CrowdStrike or SaaS or software in general. When you talk about a module, so the idea is you get into a company and you sell them something they really need right at that moment, or maybe a couple of things, but you've collected data and you know what else they need or what else they might need later. And that might be a different module. And then you're basically cross-selling within the same enterprise. And that's why it's such a wildly profitable business once you get that foothold with a customer where you guys just become so indispensable. Do I have that explanation right?
That's right, right. So the simple way, you got to keep me honest because I live and breathe this every day. But the simple way to think about this is, we have a little piece of software that runs on every computer and cloud workload, and we're always collecting security data. Well, that data can be used for different use cases. So in the early days when we started, it was, hey, prevent malware from running. Okay, that's an easy one. But now we've expanded it out to cloud security, to identity security, to next-gen SIM. So these are all different use cases. So we've expanded our TAM dramatically, from where we started. It's over 100 going to 200 over the next couple of years. So that's really the key to it. Once we've collected the data, which is a cost, right? That goes in your gross margin. Once we've collected that, then we have it. And then we've actually created different workflows on that data to solve different use cases, like what I mentioned. And once we have it, then it's almost pure margin for every new module that we sell.
One of the things that we've talked about in the past, and I'd love you to bring me up to speed on it, we're now in this world where we're no longer debating whether or not people are going to return to office or remain at home, or there'll be some sort of new standard that's hybrid. I think at this point, basically, we've kind of settled into a world where it's all three at the same time. Different types of companies, different types of employees, different times of year. It's just everyone's doing whatever they're doing. But what that means from a cybersecurity standpoint is that we have got to be able to authenticate our employees no matter what device they're on, no matter what Wi-Fi network, no matter where they are. And of course, there are best practices from the company's standpoint, but from your standpoint, that seems like a huge opportunity to give boards of directors and C-suite people the peace of mind that they're tightened up enough that they can let their workforce work from where they need them to work.
Well, absolutely. And when you look at what's going on today, and you guys are covering the headlines, you see all the hacks. I mean, just over the last 3 months, it's been crazy the amount of data hacks that have been out there, and those are all identity based. So what that means is, and a lot of people think a lot of these attacks take place because of malware. That isn't necessarily the case. A lot of them are identity based, meaning someone phished a credential, right? They were able to compromise or get access to somebody's username and password, or they were able, in many cases, to get access to the system that actually manages those credentials, right? So what we've been able to do, and I'm gonna make it simple for the users because you have different players that are out there. So let's use a couple of names, but we'll put it in buckets. For identity, which is a big category, you have the identity creators. That's like Microsoft, right? Azure AD and Entra and those sort of things, right? They create identities. Then you have the identity aggregators, like Ping and Okta. Okay, so they take all the various identities that are out there, and now you got to make it easy for people to log in. You can't have 20 identities; you want to have it down to one.
Right.
And that's the aggregators. And then what we are the identity protectors. So we work with the Ping and Oktas. We help secure the Microsoft technologies. And we got into this probably 3 or 4 years ago. We bought a company and it's been totally integrated into our technology stack. And we were way ahead of the curve, realizing that these identity attacks were going to be a huge problem. And it's a huge business for us now. We bought the company. It had 7 million ARR. And the last publicly reported number, which was in Q4, we were at 150 million of ARR just for that business. And by the way, we didn't sell it for the better part of 18 months because we integrated it. So it's a huge business for us.
Yeah. And at 150 million ARR, that's a business that probably still has tons of potential as more and more organizations wake up and recognize all of the Trojan horses and all of the big gaps are human based. Right?
Yes.
You have employees; they have access to various things that the company does, and they make human errors. And phishing attacks are not terribly high tech. Sometimes it's just as simple as catching somebody at the wrong moment where they're not thinking straight and getting them to respond.
That's correct. And in our business, we say one of the biggest challenges is between the keyboard and the chair,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
the user, right? And
absolutely.
and even when you think about how these attacks unfold, and we've listened because we've had to respond to many companies, not our customers necessarily, that had breaches. Good part is they become our customers, but we listen to the recordings when they call the help desk. Help desk, you have to think about it. They're gold. They're gold on how many tickets they can close and how fast they can close a ticket. So if somebody's yelling at them, I need access, the CEO wants this or that.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll be tricked into giving somebody access and then it's game over.
Yeah. So part of your business model is that you will respond to these incidents as like a mitigation. Like, okay,
Yes.
so you were hacked. Okay, we're going to come on site now. We're going to try to figure out how it happened. First things first, we're going to stop the bleeding and shore up everything. Then we're going to try to figure out what happened. And then we're going to make some suggestions about how to make sure it doesn't happen again and whatever else we turn up in that process. So I've described it before as kind of like a SWAT team. But that SWAT team is almost like the front end sales team, because once you're able to do that, then the corporation or the government or the municipality, they're just like, well, let's keep these guys around. Let's make sure that we're protected and you're ready to go. And by that point, you've diagnosed the problem and you've already made some recommendations about the solution. Who in their right mind would dismiss you at that point? Like at that point, we got to have CrowdStrike. So that's a really great way to introduce yourself to new potential customers, even though it's a really dark time for them. The silver lining is finally they're going to get some professional help. Is that how you see it?
It's absolutely true. And, that's less than 10. The pure services work is less than 10% of our overall revenue by design. I mean, I could build that out to be even bigger, but we're always managing it. And the key piece of that is for every dollar of services that a customer spends, it turns into $6 of subscription, about $6 of subscription revenue. So that means when we get in there and we do a response engagement, and we are one of 2, maybe 3 big players that are out there that get the call, really one of 2. And I mean, our success rate in converting is like almost 100%.
I could imagine that.
Yeah. So, and we're operating at the board level, right?
Right.
It's compressed the sales cycles. Yeah.
Yeah. When there's an incident, you're not talking to, the vice president of engineering. You're talking to the people who are the most at risk and have the most at stake of cleaning it up and fixing it. And
Correct.
you have their attention. It's not
Yes.
not a cold call. I want to put a pin in cybersecurity just for a moment and just talk corporately. So obviously, for those who haven't figured it out by now, I am a long-term investor in CrowdStrike. Have been, I think, since you guys came public. 2019 was the IPO. Do I have that right?
Yep.
Okay.
2019.
So it's a 5th anniversary, and you celebrated it by inclusion into the S&P 500. That's pretty cool.
It's very cool. And we did some stats on that ourselves. I mean, I think we're one of the fastest to make it, and we're the fastest security company to make it.
Okay. We'll double check, but I believe that. That sounds right.
Double check. But if you look at since IPO, we 10x'd our ARR and revenue, we 10x'd our customer counts, we 10x'd our market cap, we 10x'd the number of endpoints we protect in 5 years, right? And and we only had, a handful of modules, I think, at the time when we went public. Now we're 28. So, you can see the momentum in the business, and that data, I call it data gravity. That data gravity allows us to continue to win more than our fair share of business in these customers. And that really is the key, is to consolidate their spend and take money from other places and put it with CrowdStrike.
So this is a big theme right now when you listen to companies report earnings, or you listen to software companies talk about sales cycles are now getting elongated, which I guess is something that everyone's going to see at some point. And a lot of that is more dependent on the economy than anything else. But one thing that seems to be repeated everywhere is that companies are looking for less vendors, not more.
Right.
Companies want to consolidate and have more of the services that they need coming from the same player rather than have this small. And I can attest to that as a small business owner with all kinds of vendors for everything under the sun. Sometimes I'll tell some of the founders, hey, you ever think about merging with with this other company?
Yeah.
So I get that impulse. Is that another reason why you guys are winning to the extent that you are? Is just that ability to provide a lot of things to a lot of people and not just be one box that they're checking off?
It is, and when you look at where we are today, and when we talk about security, I'm going to answer your question. Security is a big market, and in general, security needs to parallel the slope of the technology curve. So as technology gets more complex, you need security for all those complexities, right?
Yeah.
So we certainly don't cover every aspect of the security market, but the big ones that we do cover, and we cover a lot, we want to be the best in. So there's a whole bunch of things we're not going to be a firewall vendor because we think that's commoditized. We want to do what we're doing. So let me just state that. When we think about customers' buying behavior, they have come to us and said, you're basically one of our the most strategic security technology we have. So we want to buy more from you and we want to consolidate on your platform.
Yeah.
And we've done that, and we've showed the consolidation play over the last number of years. So we sat down with customers and they said, we want to buy more, but you need to make it easy. You got 28 modules, you're going to have however many, you need to make it easy. So we said, well, you work with us and you tell us, how do you want to buy this thing? So we literally sat down with our best customers and they said, we want the flexibility to be able to use anything in your catalog. We want to, like Amazon, give you a commitment. And the more we commit, the bigger discount we get. And then we want to use everything. So we said, great. We put it all together and we launched Falcon Flex. You may have heard me talk about this. This is a game changer for us. We are doing more and bigger deals than we've ever done because of Falcon Flex.
This is the bundle for Fortune 500 companies that want access to everything.
Everything. And by the way, we're going down into the mid-market with it. There's no reason why some of these smaller, I said mid-market, right? There's $20,000 billion companies out there. So we can do bigger deals and allow the full capabilities of our technology just based upon the commitments they're going to give to CrowdStrike. They get a better deal, we get a bigger deal, and it's been a game changer. So this is one you got to stay close to. I'm really excited about, and you heard more on the last earnings call. You'll continue to hear more about it.
Absolutely. So what was the process just before we leave this, what was the process of index inclusion like? Do you get a heads up from S&P Dow Jones, or does one of your buddies say, hey, look at your market cap, you're probably getting in? So I know it's like there's a gap accounting, 4 quarters of profits. There's market cap. You have to be at least bigger than the smallest company.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a couple of other things, but did you know, hey, this is about to happen?
I mean, this is a funny topic because you'll laugh. It's literally a black box. We had no idea. I mean, the only thing we knew was we were eligible.
Yeah.
And we checked all the boxes because, at that point it was 5 quarters of profitability. We had the right market cap and, there's a lot of momentum. So, but the thing is, it's sort of one in and one out for the most part.
Yes.
So somebody had to go. I mean, you saw the players that went, 3 players went, 3 new players came in. Yeah. And I mean, it's a pretty stiff list of people that are ready to be included. And some people have been on the waiting list for a long time. So to get on really the first time we were eligible within such a short period of time after the IPO is just a testament to CrowdStrike, what we built, all of our people.
You guys are first ballot Hall of Fame. I want to talk about Q1 earnings. So this came out in early June, but just the highlights here. Revenue, $932 million, which was up 33% year over year. ARR, which is, I think you've told me, the most important measure, up 33% to $3.65 billion. So that's an annual run rate of $3.65 billion in annually recurring revenue. Yeah. Record cash flow at $322 million, which was 35% of revenue. So talking about margins. And subscription gross margin at 78% for the quarter, which I think you told me is blended. But I mean, these are obviously fundamentals are just absolutely incredible. It's not easy impressing the sell side quarter after quarter, because most of the analysts already had buy recommendations on you guys, and they've taken their numbers up, and somehow you still managed to exceed. Do you worry about that kind of treadmill or that game of continually being able to up the ante, or is it not really something you worry too much about?
Well, you have to. I mean, you have to step back, and as a public company, you're under the screw every day. There's a game that's being played, and I say game. There's a scoreboard, right? You know
right.
what things are. We don't get distracted by that on a daily basis. And I think what we've really tried to focus on is if we can get the customers protected, if we got the best software, got the best packaging, and we're really solving problems, and that's our mission, I think we're going to be successful. And as you pointed out, when you look at those metrics, my CFO, Bert Podbear, and myself, we really focus on two big things. There's a lot of things we look at, but it's ARR and it's cash flow. Okay. And I'm a simple sort of guy when I look at this stuff. ARR is your health. Like, we don't deal with billings and a bunch of other things. People ask me about billings. I don't even know what it is. I don't even look at it. It's irrelevant to me.
Meaning like when a sale closes this quarter, next quarter, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's like when you sold something, when you build it, right?
Yeah.
Right. So when you look at
revenue recognition.
Yeah. And it's like people are trying to use billings as a proxy to ARR, but we're already giving you ARR. So
right. That's the old world.
That's the old world. Right. Yeah. So for your listeners, ARR is king of the hill for a software as a service company. And then the second piece of that is cash flow. When you look at the cash flow, it gets back to the business model that we talked about. I spent as much time thinking about our technology model as our business model. When you can rain cash like this, I mean, because we collect the data and we cross-selling these modules, and we just keep doing that into our install base, and our net retention numbers, are best in class. This is really where you have the machine. The more it cranks, it's a big flywheel, right? And it just keeps generating cash. So those are the two big ones that we look at, and I think the results, speak for themselves. And I think that's why the stock has done what it has, and why people are excited about CrowdStrike.
Let's put up growth at scale. So anything on here worth spending a moment on as the CEO of the company? When you look at these metrics, and for the listener, we're looking at ending ARR, we're looking at net new ARR, subscription revenue, and total revenue, and we're looking at the change Q1 of this year versus the prior year. And of course, everything is up and to the right. But George, is there anything on here worth getting into?
Well, I think one of the big ones is the ending ARR at 33%. This is, we're not a $300 million company. Yeah. At 33%, at 3.6 billion. I mean, this is massive, extraordinary. Yeah. And again, you probably have the math on it. There's not many companies at our scale. I think there's 3, maybe 4 at our scale that are growing above 30%. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest ones. And then once you have that, then all the other sort of metrics, tend to fall into place. And we have extremely high gross retention rates because people stay with CrowdStrike once they're a customer.
These are some of the things that you said were key takeaways from the first quarter. This is your comms people, but this is what they pointed out to the street. John, do we have this key takeaways? So obviously we talked about the numbers, but maybe worth getting into driving platform adoption, more modules than ever before. The number of deals involving cloud identity or next-gen SIEM, which you'll tell me what that is, more than doubled. And you are now the cloud security provider of choice for 62 of the Fortune 100 companies. Those all sound like pretty major milestones. Why are those the key takeaways that you wanted investors to know about?
Yeah, these are great stats. So let's talk a little bit about the platform adoption and the 3 big businesses that we have and emerging businesses within the company outside of what people know us for, just endpoint protection. So when we think about the 3 big ones, their identity, which we talked a little bit about, their cloud, which you just gave some of the stats. We're one of the largest cloud security providers in the world. Yeah. And their next-gen SIEM, SIEM, and that's security event information management. And okay. I'm going to come back to that because this is I think, a game changer for us as well. So when you look at these areas, they have some of the fastest growth within our portfolio. They have massive TAM, multi-billion, some tens of billions of dollars of TAM opportunity. And it's an area that's ripe for consolidation. So let's take next gen SIM and some of the players that are out there. Some of the players, the Splunks of the world, and some of the other players that basically take information in and then allow you to do something with it. And this is really important. Day by day, people generate more security information. So every device, every computer, every cloud workload is generating security logs, right? And you want to be able to take those logs and make sense of them and then use those in your AI algorithms. So in the past, before we had this capability, people would use our technology and we generated, I would say 80+% of the data that they cared about, and they'd ship it out of our platform and they put it into a Splunk. And then you pay Splunk a lot of money or whoever, right?
To do what? To interpret it?
Yeah, well, then what they would do is then they would take other third-party data. So they would take all this data and put it in one place and then try to understand it.
Okay.
And the reality is the bulk of the data was coming from us, and the fidelity of the data was the highest because we're collecting data right on those computers.
Yeah.
So we acquired a company a number of years ago and then fully integrated it over the last 6 months that allows us, it's a next gen SIM, to basically keep all the data within our own platform. And now we just ingest the 15% of the data that we weren't getting. So the firewall logs, the email logs, the things that we don't do, we now ingest. So rather than
it's a new module for you.
It's a new module and it's a huge business for us.
Yeah.
And when you look at the SIM market, right? This is one which I like because a lot of legacy technology and a lot of customers that were not happy with what they had. So they were looking for something better, faster, cheaper. So now I can go to the customers and say, by the way, you don't have to pay for all the data to go out. You don't have to pay another vendor to do this aggregation. You just need to ship me the 15% I didn't have, and I'm going to give it to you better, faster, cheaper. And by the way, we've now activated. So our 30,000 plus, that's the last public number. It's greater than that today. But our 30,000 plus direct customers are now all next gen SIM enabled. So now the sales play is to go in and basically turn them all into SIM customers.
So this is money they're spending elsewhere for not as good of a solution because the data is moving and being chopped and mixed up.
Right.
So now it's easier and better. It seems like an
faster.
obvious. So the reason I love that story, the parallels to my business are really obvious. We did a survey, I'm going to say 4 years ago. We were doing tax consulting. I have CPAs working at the firm, kind of like giving consultative advice on the tax situation for households, businesses, executives, foundations, etc. We did a poll. We said, what if we were to file your taxes? Show of hands, who would be interested? It was like 72%. So of course we immediately started hiring more accountants because it's the same thing. People's CPAs are taking 80% of the data they need is coming from the accounts that we're managing.
Right.
So we're sending that data out, maybe having a few conversations, and then the output is we have no control over it. So it's the same kind of situation where we just said, what if we can pull in the 15 or 20% of stuff we don't know, use the 80% that's already here, and do that service for customers? And honestly, George, nobody says no. I can't staff that business fast enough. I can't scale it. So I love when things like that happen, where you're almost like listening to the customer and then adapting accordingly.
Yeah, so let me just give you, just to put it in a real world perspective, with one of the biggest banks in the world, they were like 40 terabytes a day they were ingesting, huge amount of data, right? We cut their bill from their prior vendor to 1/3 of what they were paying.
Wow.
And the search that would take 2 days, because they're talking about a lot of data, took under a minute with our technology. Wow. So now they started with just security, and now they're expanding it out into non-security use cases.
Right. So I want to ask you about AI and the opportunity for cyber opportunity is a nice euphemism for it. The risks of AI, why it's an opportunity for CrowdStrike, but why it's really something that kind of antes up the potential problems. I think everyone's really excited about the build out, the data centers, and the oncoming rush of consumer applications and business applications, but you're probably looking at this from a different point of view. You're probably looking at this from, okay, what are our customers going to need in the AI era? So talk a little bit about how you guys see that shaping up.
Yeah, so I mean, at the macro level, it's absolutely, as you've followed and you know all the companies that are help driving this, it's a game changer, right? And many of the companies that we're dealing with, they're dabbling or they've got more robust programs in using AI internally. So they want to be able to essentially leverage AI, I would say, to make things easier and reduce cost. And in some cases, doesn't mean they're cutting people, but they want to make their people more productive, right?
Yeah.
So what we said is, and this is our Charlotte AI offering, is we don't want just a chatbot, right? That, hey, ask a question, get an answer. We actually want an AI agent, something that's going to do work on behalf of our customer. And that's really what Charlotte does. So we've taken the collective wisdom of CrowdStrike over the last, say, 10 years. We've embedded it within Charlotte to ask a question on a threat actor or threat indicator, right? Piece of data, you can get an answer, no problem. It's like talking to the smartest person we have and who doesn't forget anything. And then we also then wired it into the workflow. And this is a big part of the platform. There's a whole workflow that allows customers to be more productive, right? It does work on behalf of the customer. So you literally can have a conversation with Charlotte. It can find a problem or an issue, and then it can actually fix it or deal with the issue. So we can take 8 hours of work and distill that down into 10 minutes. So that's kind of our view.
So we're in the time of the chatbot now, which is fairly reactive. I know they're about to get much better based on what we saw from Microsoft and Apple. They'll become more conversative. I don't know if that's a word.
Conversant, I think.
But right now, you ask a question, it calculates. There's a second lag, and then it gives you back an answer. And then if you ask another question, it's as though the first question didn't take place. And that's what's changing. That's getting better. But when you talk about the distinction between a chatbot versus an AI-enabled agent, so this is something away from the CrowdStrike context, but this is something where I tell Siri, go out and buy me tickets to the Giant game opening day. I want to be in the 100 section, and I need an aisle seat. And then a few seconds later, Siri says, done. Here, your tickets are now in your wallet. That's like where this is headed from the consumer perspective when you talk about chatbot versus agent. What does it look like from an enterprise B2B standpoint, the things that I've just described?
Well, it's a good question. I think it's a good analogy, and it's good to see we're both Giant fans. It's been rough for a number of years.
Unfortunately.
But, yes. But when you look at what an enterprise or a security operations center does, and again, for a lot of your listeners, they may not understand sort of the bowels of what happens, but there's an army of people that are looking at all this data, and it's, if something bad happens, they have to react to it. It's like the virtual security guards.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're allowing someone, a SOC analyst, security analyst, to basically say, tell me all the threats that pertain to my bank. Tell me all the threats that pertain to financial services. Tell me all the threats that pertain to my bank. Tell me where we're vulnerable. Then if we're vulnerable in these areas, take a remediation. That means it could patch a system. It could turn off a service that's running. It could change a user ID. And then when you're done, write a situational report. That would take 8 hours in a day, easy.
And a lot of people.
A lot of people. So now just the report writing. So now what we've done, we've got an incident workbench. We actually take all of these unique indicators that, it would take, it's sort of 1 or 2 dimensional a person can deal with. We're dealing with billions of parameters, and we're going, hey, there's things over here that all relate to this particular issue that you may not have even considered. So we can surface all that, and then we can have Charlotte actually run everything to ground, fix it, and then write the report on what they did. And with a bow, they can give it to their boss.
So who on earth is going to say no to that? Like considering the alternative, that's a really powerful story to tell someone who's responsible for making those decisions at a large company.
Yeah.
Okay.
And part of what we've done is, of course, we leverage this technology. We actually leveraged it before we made it public, but that gives us the scalability when we're dealing with our own customers.
Okay. Does Charlotte have a voice?
Charlotte has. We actually have. There's a gal who's Charlotte. If you've seen any of our commercials or what have you, yeah. So Charlotte does have a voice, but
okay.
We do have a person attached to it, and it's gone really well.
All right, very cool, George. I want to thank you so much for your time, and once again congratulate you and the entire CrowdStrike organization. It's just remarkable what you guys have accomplished since coming public 5 years ago. And of course, congrats again on S&P 500 index inclusion, another incredible milestone. And thank you for being so accessible to the listeners who have learned the story over the years, who love the story and track the stock. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate being here, and always good to see you and talk to you. Thanks, Josh.
All right, cheers. That's it from us, guys. For more, go to CrowdStrike.com. Highly recommend their investor relations section. Lots of great information every time they report or issue a release. Thanks to George Kurtz for being here. We really appreciate it.